Welcome back to Garfinomics, the world's best official, unofficial Garfield-based economics and politics podcast. I am your host, and joining me today is a very special guest. We have the Daily Garfcast joining us today. Welcome, Daily Garfcast.
Hello, thank you.
It's so nice to have you here. I listen to your Daily Garfcast almost every single day. At least when I see it on Twitter, I'm like, okay, I'm listening to this. Nice short little explanation of today's comic if I haven't gotten to it already. Very cool stuff. Really love what you do. And I wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about Garfield history and this sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, like a consumerist culture surrounding the Garfield phenomenon and almost sort of the history of Garfield in light of today being Garfield's official birthday.
It's incredible how many people love Garfield, even the ones that don't read the comic or anything, or even know there's a comic. They just see this fat orange cat and what he gets up to, and they love it.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think there's people who 100% do not even read the comic, or as we were talking yesterday, actually, you said that you had a conversation with somebody or something came to your attention where people didn't even realize that the comic was still going on, that it was still being produced. They thought it was just, it was over.
Yeah, with the recent popularity with his 45th birthday coming up, a lot of the comic strips that I tweet every day, I was started noticing a lot of replies that people didn't even realize it was still ongoing. Like the new comics are coming out every day.
Yeah. And I thought that was really funny because I had just had a conversation with one of my friends about Garfinomics. And, he mentioned something about thinking that Jim Davis had passed away some time ago. And I said, no, he's still around. The comics are still going. It's still a thing. And we're celebrating that thing today. That thing with Garfield's birthday. You said
Yeah.
45 years, right?
Yep, 45 today.
45 today. Wow. That's insane.
Yeah, I think they're going from the first Garfield comic strip, because if you look at the Wikipedia page, Garfield does show up 2 years earlier when the comic strip was called John. So, there's 2 years there in limbo.
Yeah, yes. I was looking at the history, and it seemed that Jim Davis had started with a comic strip called Norm the Gnat, and I believe 1973, and it didn't really go anywhere. It didn't get mainstream popularity, and he was advised that insects are not relatable characters. So then he transitioned into the comic strip John for about 2 years, which ended up turning into Garfield, which we all know and love. So we're gonna go through today. We're talked a little bit about the history, and what I really want to talk about is sort of I really want to kind of pull back the veil on the Garfield empire, right? So Jim Davis, when he created this, I think he sort of pivoted after Norm the Gnat from making something a bit more in his wheelhouse. I don't want to say creatively his own or more to his creative vision, but with Garfield, there's definitely a noticeable shift towards something that's going to be commercial. He definitely had the mindset that this was going to be produced to become a commercial empire. And one of the things that he did that actually sort of demonstrates this is that during Garfield's creation, it's very common for comic strips, especially at that time, to become owned by syndicates. And these syndicates will sort of take over the licensing rights or the brand itself. It depends on the nature of the contract. But Jim Davis actually created his own syndicate called Paws Inc. so that he could have full creative control over it. So it's kind of interesting that he did that. because it just hadn't been done before. And it gave him so much control over the brand and over what gets made with that brand.
Yeah, I mean, he really knocked it out of the park. He went for it and he created exactly what he wanted.
He did. I was reading in a project. It was an art history project, actually, funnily enough, but it's 125 pages long, and it reads more like a dissertation rather than anything else. And in it, I found a very interesting quote that Jim Davis, by 1984, had a yearly salary of over $30 million, which was on par at the time with the salaries of the CEOs of PepsiCo and AT&T, which is wild to me. Very crazy. Because that would have been in less than 10 years of Garfield existing as a comic at that time.
Yeah, that's crazy. Just for an orange cat, not even like a product you consume daily that you have to buy a lot of,
No, I created this funny orange cat, and now I make $30 million a year. You know? Oh, I wish it were me. I wish it were me. Jim Davis is a legend. But the paper I'm referencing, the project that I'm referencing, this is an abstract by Iris B. Engel for their senior art history abstract in 2019. It's titled, "It's Garfield's World, We Just Live in It. An exploration of Garfield the cat as icon, moneymaker, and beast," with project advisors Alex Kitnick and Yuka Suzuki. So I'm going to paraphrase the abstract of this project here. And this is a project, by the way, from the Bard College in New York by this author. And in the abstract paraphrased, it opens with, "Breaking Guinness World Records for most syndicated newspaper comic strip, Garfield has made over $800 million in comic sales alone, making it the largest grossing newspaper comic strip to date. Garfield is often written off as a banal representation of daily life churned out by a corporation. While these statements might be true, it is more important to look at Garfield as a symptom rather than the cause. This thesis is an examination of how Garfield is a manifestation of culture in the United States, what he embodies for modern audiences, and how the public has appropriated him. As a cultural phenom, Garfield has become the modern embodiment of a beast fable, a late-stage capitalist business, and the usage of copyright law. The cantankerous cat acts as a mode for exploring these subjects and dissecting the role of material culture in the subject of art history." Wow, what an intro. I'm I'm enthralled. I'm ready. I'm ready to see where we're going with this, where Iris takes us with this. But this is the paper where I am getting a lot of the figures. There are a lot of citations in this paper. So if you're interested in seeing where all the sources for a lot of the figures that we're going to be mentioning today, the sources are mostly all going to be contained within this paper. So I want to talk about the power of licensing with you, Daily Garfcast. Do you know much about licensing for comics or just copyright, intellectual properties, anything like that?
Not much, no. I know specifically with comics, like you mentioned, the syndication, big groups will buy up the comics and play them. Because I remember hearing before where, a certain newspaper will cut ties with a certain indication and lose, like 20 comics or something like that.
Right. And I think with Jim Davis being able to license Garfield himself, he sort of changed the game there. There were shares of Paws Incorporated that were over time sort of sold or distributed, which sort of diluted the control. But Davis actually bought back all of the shares of Paws Inc. From a syndicate in 1994, saying that the only way to guarantee myself long-term security was to do this. And this makes it so that Davis is actually, I believe this makes him the only cartoonist who owns more of his own cartoon strip than any other cartoonist, which is a feat that has kept him both rich and reputable. I mean, everybody loves not only Garfield the cat, but if you know anything about the comic, Jim Davis himself. I've never heard a bad word about him.
Yeah, he seems to be a upstanding guy. You know, he didn't sell out or anything. I haven't heard of any scandals involving him. So yeah, he did well.
No. I mean, power to him. I mean, even when looking at the merchandise that was created, I mean, Davis is ultimately the person with the final say. Even looking at games, like, have you ever played Garfield Kart?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we love Garfield Kart around here. I have an embarrassingly large amount of hours on Garfield Kart on Steam. um, but I mean, even with Garfield Kart, Jim Davis himself was the producer. He had the final say, which is just astounding. You know, not a lot of other property creators have this much control directly over their IP, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I know. I feel like at least once a month you hear about a creator of some old property, you know, doesn't even know what the company that bought it is doing with it anymore.
No, and with a lot of these syndicates, they can, if they end up, you know, having a majority ownership over the property itself, they can sort of in perpetuity continue making those comics for those properties without needing the original cartoonist at all. Their input, they could even continue making the comic long after their death if they wanted to. So let's move on from the licensing aspect of this to the promotion of the merchandise itself, right? So in this paper, Iris argues that the promotional merchandise released had a dual purpose, which was to ingrain Garfield's image into the collective consciousness and to make money. Like we were saying earlier, Garfield was created solely with the intention, not solely with the intention, but with a direct mindset towards making a commercial success, making money. The concept of the humor being universal became increasingly important when Garfield's face began appearing all over the world. His personality, as defined by Davis in an interview, consists of being, quote, lazy, overweight, and grouchy. How can you not love that? Perhaps that Davis refers to in the quote, how could you not love that, is Garfield's ability to be so affluent that he is able to be unpleasant and uninvolved. Garfield, at his core, is an apolitical cat. He can behave this way because he exists in a class that is untouched by the political climate, also known as the leisure class. And I found this very interesting because sociologist Thorstein Veblen defines the leisure class as being, quote unquote, exempt from industrial employment, end quote, not participating in productive labor. And for this anthropomorphized cat to be exempt from mousing or doing any traditional sort of cat work or anything like that, you know, he doesn't do anything at all. He's lazy. He gets to sleep in. He gets to eat lasagna. He typically doesn't seem to better the household in really a significant way. And so, therefore, we could argue that Garfield has the characteristic feature of a leisure class lifestyle or being in the leisure class. And I think that in itself is relatable. I feel like most people relate to a lazy, sort of smug, unaffected house cat because it's almost sort of desirable, right? Like you see Garfield and you're like, oh, that's me. Like I want to be like him.
Yeah, he's definitely, you know, even if you're active and stuff, I mean, you probably want to be like Garfield. You would want to live like that leisurely lifestyle, doing nothing. But at the same time, like even somebody who is working, chances are they're working a regular Monday through Friday week, and Garfield hates Mondays, so he even appeals to like somebody who is working.
Exactly. It's almost like he's speaking directly to the common person. Most people, like you said, work that Monday through Friday lifestyle. And Garfield's looking you in the face and saying, don't we hate Mondays, folks? Like we hate them. We hate work at all. I want to sleep in. Don't you? And so working under someone is sort of seen as a sign of weakness and a quote unquote mark of inferiority for this leisure class, as stated by Veblen. And Garfield refuses to belong to anyone. The cat's lazy behavior is perhaps the attitude that, as we were just talking about, many working class readers wish they were able to have, as the capitalist system in the United States works to make labor seem undignified. Garfield's character appeals to the individual who wishes they were separated from the labor force, those who may be without a choice of when they work or not. And I think that this is foundational to Garfield's appeal to the common man, and even may be one of the reasons why we see a lot of working class inclined individuals identify so much with the smug, gluttonous cat who feels as though he is entitled to more than he normally would get as a working house cat, a cat that is a mouser, or a cat that some people have cats to keep vermin out of, chicken coops or whatever it might be. And so I feel like that plays in very heavily into his relatability.
Yeah, he even makes friends with the mice. So he's not only not working.
Yeah.
He's not, doing whatever John wants him to do. He's making friends with the mice, and John's still feeding him. And he's, going straight to the fridge and eating the entire thing. Yeah, Garfield is like the ultimate leisure animal.
Yeah, he's the dream. He's when I wake up, I want to be him. It's how I want to live my life. So let me just address a closing thought on this paper from Iris. As a product of late-stage capitalism, Garfield is the example of an artistic endeavor run by a businessman. Earning well over $1 billion and touting a Q score, or, quote, how familiar is the character and how appealing is the character, of which is equal to Big Bird from Sesame Street and higher than Spider-Man's. Garfield has dominated the world. I mean, can you imagine that? Garfield is more recognizable than Big Bird. I'm not so surprised, but Spider-Man, more people know who Garfield is than they know who Spider-Man is.
Yeah, I do find that a little surprising. Spider-Man, he's had so many iterations across the world, but I mean, Garfield's always Garfield.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, make as many Spider-Man movies as you want, make as many Spider-Verses as you want. You will never even touch the Garfiverse. You will never come close. You will not outdo him. Garfield, as a comic strip, personifies the desire of the worker to indulge their id by creating a world without conflict or politics, a window into a place that rarely changes and where nothing happens. Garfield offers solace to those who are forced to live in chaos. Manufactured to be wildly marketable, Davis made these decisions in order to turn his art into a business, putting money before artistic expression. Garfield may be a, quote, human in a catsuit, as Davis has suggested, but this cat is more business than fur. The large orange tabby may be the cat's pajamas, but he's more suited to a pinstripe suit and a fat cat cigar, which is just a wild way to close that thought off from Iris B. Engel and their project. And I was just so blown away by this. They drew me in with their abstract. And then I found out that this was an undergraduate art history project, and it was 125 pages going completely in depth into the history of Garfield, its economic impacts, and the writer's personal opinions on how it reflects in American culture. So I guess after discussing that article, that project, I want to talk to you about just where we stand today with the state of Garfield and its economic reach globally. Here's a couple fun little facts and tidbits. According to Licensing International, Garfield-themed clothing lines generate millions of dollars in revenue annually. According to the Toy Industry Association, which I am very happy exists, I didn't know there was such a thing, but that's awesome. I love to hear it. But according to the Toy Industry Association, the Garfield plush toy was one of the top-selling plush toys globally as of 2021 and continues to be. Garfield-based home decor items like mugs, pillows, and posters are also still wildly popular globally, and Garfield is one of the top-selling character brands globally, with billions of dollars in licensed product sales alone, according to Licensing International. It is insane. It's been, roughly 45 years, right? Well, actually, as of today, exactly 45 years. And Garfield is the most recognizable character globally. And it's insane. When I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, it's not even related solely to an American audience. I see on the Garfinomics Instagram page, for instance, when I post a silly Garfield meme or whatever, a lot of the likes, a lot of the people who are interacting, some of them don't even seem to speak English, or at least not as a first language. I see a lot of people engaging on a global level as well, which just tells you how insane the reach is and how forward thinking Jim Davis must have been to expand that reach on a global scale.
Yeah, one of the first people I noticed quote retweeting on Twitter a lot was in Spanish. So yeah, I see all kinds of languages come across in the replies and quote retweets for the Daily Garfcast.
Yeah,
Garfield's just, I mean, it's a global want to be lazy.
It is. And it serves to show you that, people globally, all across the world, we are all a lot more similar to each other than we are different from each other. We all want to be Garfield. I don't care if you are posting from Mexico City. I don't care if you're posting from Argentina or Switzerland. We all want to be Garfield. We're infinitely more. We have infinitely more in common with each other in this sort of working class, I guess you would say, this working class that we're all a part of. And we all want to be in that leisure class. I know I do. I do not want to go to my job tomorrow. I want to get your opinion on this, because Paws Inc., while it was, completely controlled by Jim Davis himself directly, the Paws Inc. was actually sold to Viacom, which I think Viacom is now Paramount Global, I think is their official name now, Paramount Global. They own Nickelodeon and properties like that. But Paws Inc. was sold to Viacom in 2019. And I wanted to get your thoughts on if you think that there's going to be any sort of significant impacts to the brand going forward as a part of Viacom's Nickelodeon banner, and Garfield being under that. What do you think there?
I think so. This is just like how things have been going lately. A lot of this, like, you can't just be like a one-man operation anymore and get popular. You have to sell out to one of the bigger companies like Disney or Viacom or what have you. So I think ultimately there will be more Garfield now, because it's not going to rely on just Paws Inc. trying to put deals together and, sell stuff. They're going to have that whole, I assume Viacom has a whole network in the back of how they put out products for, I think specifically Garfield is under the Nickelodeon brand now. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they put out all kinds of toys and stuff. So they have that in place to do that. I'm hoping the Daily Comic doesn't stop at any point. And I know they announced another live action movie with Chris Pratt voicing Garfield. So we're
Yes.
I mean they're putting stuff out. It's just a matter of, what is it going to stick to that same quality when Jim Davis had the final say, or are they just going to pump it out like another cartoon for the kids?
Garfield is definitely more commercially minded, more sort of about making money. But at the same time, I mean, there's an undeniable Jim Davis touch. His Midas touch is sort of undeniably a part of this. And I think without his involvement, it will be interesting to see if it remains to be as relatable, if it will sort of keep that sort of relatable smugness of the cats and everything that we've known to love about Garfield. And I'm not sure, but it is interesting that you mentioned the movie with with Chris Pratt voicing Garfield. I'm sure everybody's upset about that or making noise about that. It seems every time there's a cartoon character, Chris Pratt pops up and everybody screams and throws their hands in the air. But yesterday was Father's Day, and I went to research because I don't know if canonically in the comics Garfield has an actual biological father. And according to the comics, it turns out no, Garfield's mother and several other family members sort of make appearances or are referenced. But weirdly enough, his biological father is almost never referenced. And in fact, we don't even know the name of Garfield's biological father. But in the upcoming movie with Chris Pratt, Samuel L. Jackson actually signed on to voice the character of Garfield's biological father, whose name is going to be Vic. So
Wow.
I guess new Garfield lore has been created by Viacom, by the new movie that they're making. And that new lore is that Garfield does have a biological father, and his name is Vic. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I think we have sort of proven why Garfield deserves to be as economically successful as it is. And I think that if while under the Nickelodeon banner, they're able to market it even more and expand the reach of Garfield even further than it already is, being one of the most recognizable characters of all time globally, then we're really just living in a Garfield world. It's gonna be Garfield everything at that point if they can put that into hyperdrive. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, not really. Just I really think Garfield is timeless. Like we're always gonna have people working and hating their jobs and hating Monday and wanting to be that fat, lazy orange cat.
That's right. I agree. It's always gonna be like that, and he will forever be relatable because of that. But yeah, well, I mean, great. I think that's a wrap then. I really appreciate you coming on to guest on the Garphonomics podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm so honored to have the Daily Garfcast on my show. And if you want to check out the Daily Garfcast, I'll throw the mic to you and let you do any plugs if you have them.
Yeah, I'm Daily Garfcast on Twitter. I post the daily comic strip and I do audio description of it with a little explanation at the end. And that's all I do. I just keep it simple.
And it's perfect and it's beautiful. And I listen to it every morning with my morning cup of coffee, and you should too.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks for tuning in to Garphonomics, the world's best official, unofficial Garfield-based economics and politics podcast. I've been your host. Our guest has been the Daily Garfcast. Check him out. Show him some love. All right. We will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.